Though this land is shrouded in pain and darkness, it teems behold the sacred world. With forethought, we may bend life to our will, to remake the world as we see fit. But beware, nature protects itself. But do not forget, whatever you sow, you must harvest. With forethought, we may bend life to our will, to remake the world as we see fit. But beware, nature protects itself. But do not forget, whatever you sow, you must harvest. But beware, nature protects itself. But do not forget, whatever you sow, you must harvest. Though this land is shrouded in pain and darkness, it teems with life. Behold the sacred grove. With forethought, we may bend life to our will. To remake the world as we see fit. But beware, nature protects itself. But do not forget, whatever you sow, you must harvest.
Hey guys, and welcome to a new video. Today, update on the Herald of Thunder, Autobomber, Assassin, and oh my lord, I think this is a meta crusher, to be honest. You know, there is builds that are like super fast at mapping, right? There is builds that are super good at bossing, like super tanky, like delving, like whatever you want to do, Labyrinth. This build kinda does everything at once, you know? We are like 250% movement speed, or even 300% if you get a nice elusive proc. We have an explode chest. Our Herald of Thunder is currently doing, and it's not even maxed yet, right? 6.7 million Shaper DPS on Herald of Thunder alone. Then we have two brands that are doing like somewhere between like 3 and 4 million damage. So we have over 10 million Shaper DPS or Saurus DPS on this build. It is a speed mapper. It is just probably hands down, this build is just insane. I think this build should not exist the way it does because it is way too strong for actually scaling. A Herald, right, that hits for like 7-8 times is like, I don't know, like if I put like awakened gems into this build leveled up, for example, the awakened added lightning, for example, on level 5 gives you 1 additional to lightning skills, right? I would have like 7.5 million Shaper DPS just with Herald of Thunder. Like, this build is just stupid. I don't know what else to say. This build is... I love it. This build, great. Okay, map showcase, I think you saw in the beginning with all the Conquerors, all on Awakener 8. So pretty good stuff there. Conqueror killing in like 1 or 2 seconds with Herald of Thunder, it's insane, right? And once the enemy gets low, like low life or something, right, they take even more damage. That's why Cyrus died so fast in the end. The only problem was I was like dashing or flame dashing to get away from his quadra beam, and I dashed exactly into the degen ground. So yeah, that was probably not that good, but usually shouldn't be a big deal. This build is just insane. Good. The only thing it lacks a little bit, and this is just gear depending, is the life. So if you say, oh my god, you have 4k life, right? No, this is a hybrid build, so the energy shield counts as well. So we are close to 8,000 life or effective HP, and we are running dual Leech. So it is actually not that tanky. But the thing is, armor gives you physical mitigation, right? If you go evasion-based items, you get like dodge, evade, like that kind of stuff, right? If you go energy shield, you have nothing. And that's why usually energy shield builds have a lot more energy shield than comparable to a life build, you know? It's not hard to reach like 10,000 life on a CI build, which is kind of the equivalent to having like 6,000 life on a life-based build, right? So, build guide. How do we start? Holy shit, there is actually a shit ton of things to know on this build. I would say, first of all, currency-wise, you know, because I already stick probably 100 exalts, maybe even more into this build. It's only 2 weeks into the league. I got pretty rich already. Doing Cyrus carries, doing like Awakener runs. I need like, I don't know, like an hour maybe to do to spawn all the Conquerors while clearing the map fully, right? And do the Conquerors, like I could do a Cyrus every hour or something, right? And if you get some lucky with Awakener or Pay, that's a 3 exalt, right? It came all together. I'm just playing way too much, and that's why I have so much currency, right? But to start this build off, because of, I know people will ask this non-stop, leveling. How do you level this character? It's a Stormbrand character in the start, right? So you take Stormbrand, or at least in the start, Orb of Storms, then Stormbrand, add Herald of Thunder, and once you're level 56, you could put in the rings, but it's not necessary because, as I explained in the previous video, it is very hard to sustain early on, right? So you can add this later on. But leveling just as a Stormbrand character with Orb of Storms, this addition, it's super easy. I think it took like less than 5 hours to get into mapping with this character. Good. How do you start? First of all, probably a Tabula to get your Herald of Thunder damage up, the rings probably, and then it's just about grinding for your Impulsor. So the Impulsor Storm's Gift combo that I mentioned in the previous video are the budget way to go and are effective. Once you have currency, definitely an Explode chest with Frenzy on hit. This is with the Badge of your Brotherhood, because this will then make my maximum Frenzy charges to be equal to my maximum power charges. So what we are doing is just scaling power charges, and we get the same amount of Frenzy charges, and with the Frenzy on hit I can sustain that on bosses as well. So that's like another, let's say, almost like 36% more damage, more movement speed, like all the good things, right? The rest, Algo Mortis is a nice damage boost, but not necessary, so you can, as I said, take anything else, but 35% increased lightning damage taken by the enemy is more than a more multiplier, pretty much, you know? So if I check my path of building here, I have currently 6.7 million with my level 1 Awaken gems. And if I would say, is the enemy on chilled area? No, I'm going down. So the gloves alone give me 1.5 million DPS, right? Cyrus DPS that is. So it's just pretty good. Rest of the other uniques are not too necessary, okay? So I started off with like lightning, like life, resists, maybe some energy shield since we're running hybrid. But it just came together at some point, just trying to get your resistance properly done and so on. So what else is mandatory? Or at least mandatory. I'll just, let's talk about, no, let's actually, yeah, one mechanic, okay? This is like important. How do I sustain the Storm Secret damage? So as we said, or as we already know, we get like 250 damage, right? Per ring, every time the Herald ticks. And this times 2, just because I'm wearing 2 of those. So 500 damage per hit of the Herald of Thunder. My Herald of Thunder currently hits for 0.13 seconds. So if you put this one up again over here, so that means 1 divided by 0.13 is 7 point, let's calculate with 7.7 hits, right? So we take this times 7.7 because this is how often my Herald ticks per second, is a total of 3,850 damage per second that I self-inflict, right? And then obviously times 0.25 because we do have 75 lightning resistance. That means the total damage that I get is about 1,000 damage per second if your lightning res capped and you're running 2 of those rings. So this is the damage that you have to mitigate or at least sustain to actually be able to do bosses and stuff. And I solved this with the Glorious Vanity conquered by the Doriani, and this gives changes the Keystone to Corrupted Soul, which is 50% of non-chaos damage taken, bypasses Energy Shield, and gain 20%. Max life is extra ES, which is great since we're a hybrid build. We scale with life and ES. That's why it's always like great taking these life and Energy Shield clusters over here. But what that does is basically splits the damage in half, okay? So there is one problem that I failed on the last video, so I'm trying to do it again. So let's assume we get a 1,000 damage hit, okay? Then we get through the Corrupted, I think it was Corrupted Soul, yeah. So, Corrupted Soul, 50-50 split, okay? So that means in the end, we get 500 damage on life and 500 damage on ES, right? So, why is this good? Because now we can basically dual Leech. So I solved one, I just divined this one. Doriani is to get the Keystone and then the Seed, whatever. And I took the Revitalizing Lightning. You can save this with Cluster Jewels as well. There is a Cluster Jewel for that. I think it's Doriani is something, I think, where Leech Elemental damages life or something. So this would be an option too. This says 0.2 lightning damage Leech this life. How does the Leech... let's go again, life Leech. So basically it's 10 instances, right? So not just one hit and you recover all, it's 10 instances, so it's basically like 10 hits. And every instance will recover or regenerate or leech 2% of your maximum life over 5 seconds. That means 5 times 2 is 10%, right? So what does that mean? We will leech 2% per second because we're not caring about this one. This is just the total amount over the 5 seconds. What we want to know is how much can we leech per second. So that is basically 2% per second over 10 instances is a total of 20% leech per second, which is the maximum amount, the cap. If you're not running stuff like increased total recovery per life leech per second or something like that, then you can make this one even higher. But what does that mean? So I'm currently having like 4,300 life, right? That means 20% of those, so that's like 860 life per second from our, basically from the leech, right? And then we have 3,500 ES. This works a little bit different. This is something I did not know before, and this is why I always say it's great to play a lot of different builds so you get in more mechanics. I thought this counts the same for Energy Shield. It is not, okay? If we take the same on Energy Shield, if we put this over here, so now we say Energy Shield Leech, works the same, 10 instances, but it's only 1% Leech, right? Over 5 seconds, which is 5. And here we have a total of 10. So basically, Energy Shield Leech is only half of Life Leech. So that means we only have 350 AS per second, and as you see on the damage, if we are, we have to sustain, what was the final number actually, is 962 damage, 962. We divide this by 2, would be 481 damage per second that I have to kind of leech of the enemy. So the problem is, on life, we do have regen as well, which is not really necessary or mandatory because I don't even know if I have a single life regen node on my entire tree. So if I have it, then I regenerate like, I don't know, like 50 life per second or less, you know. So this is not something I focused on. But that means that I can already easily sustain the life per second through the leech. And ES, we have a tiny bit of a problem here, and I think we can solve this once we get higher ES. So we would actually need, to make this even, we would actually need more ES basically, right? To get this going. But in the end, it's not really too bad. You could, you know, I've seen messages, Ghost River, yeah, I know it doubles your recovery, so you're 20 as well, so that would work, but Leech energy shield instead of life, so that's a problem, right? So that's why I didn't take it. So overall means, can I sustain it? Yes and no. On energy shield at the moment, not, but in the end, don't forget, it's only 100 damage that I get per second, right? If you like, or 130 damage, and I still have like 3,500 ES. So if I would hit permanently for a minute on the same target, at some point I will not have any ES anymore, but I will sustain it on life, right? And then it's basically, I would technically kill myself, because once the energy shield is gone, we get 962 on life, and I can only at the moment leech 860, right? So in the end, it's not really that insane, because how often do you stand so long on a target that you actually would kill yourself? You saw on Awakener 8 that the last phase was, how long did it last? Like 5 seconds, if even, right? So I didn't even lose my energy shield at this part based on the leech rate, right? And on the other hand, we do still have the energy shield recovery rate. So as soon as there is no monsters around and your Herald does not hit, I'm not getting damage, and then the energy shield starts to recover as well as the life with the life regen naturally. Good, that's about this part. Then I took the Rune Binder for double Brand. I just personally think Brand is like the more lazy playstyle. You can play this with Arc, with Ball Lightning, with anything. You just want to make sure that you can trigger Shock, because Shock is something different on bosses, right? So the problem that I had is to understand, how can I shock Cyrus, right? Usually you have chance to shock, like on the here, 22% chance to shock, right? This is a stat that is usually for non-crit builds, because a crit with lightning damage will always inflict shock, okay? So I don't even need a chance to shock. I just need, I'm an assassin, right? I currently have 100% critical strike chance. So I always will inflict shock, which counts for normal enemies, like in maps or something like that. Super easy, dude. I one-shot all the packs, you know? It doesn't really matter. But on bosses, it works different. So how does this work on bosses? If you shock a boss, you need to hit a certain threshold, okay? That means that is to inflict the minimum amount of shock. I think we should actually just write that down to make it more clear, so you can fix that later for your build as well, because this was quite a challenge. So let's say shock on bosses, and I'm pretty sure I will make some mistakes over here, but I just hope the core idea gets over. So let's say Cyrus has like, I don't know, 100 million life. I think he has even more, but let's just say 100 million life, right? That means the shock threshold should be, I don't know, let's just assume any number that I have to reach. Let's say 50k. That means every single shock, every single crit that I do that is inflicting shock, since it's a crit, but is dealing less than 50,000, which is a threshold, the shock will get discarded, right? It does not exist. And the problem is, you need to shock to get your Herald of Thunder off. And this is the main problem here. So you need to make sure that the other ability that you're having, and by like I have here Orb of Storms, Curse on Hit, Ally Weakness, Conductivity. The Orb of Storms as a single link will not deal enough damage to shock Cyrus, for example. But since I'm wearing a staff, I have my Stonebrand, right? And the best DPS support would be Swiftbrand. But I'm not using Swiftbrand. Why? Just because Swiftbrand will just make the frequency higher. That means an overall more DPS. But what I need is a high average hit. Like I need to have an Stonebrand hit that is dealing enough damage to trigger shock and then trigger my Herald. And I did have some problems early on with this, because in maps or so, it was always no problem. But then I was doing I think an Elder Guardian or something, and I just was walking around, was like pressing Flasks, everything, you know, I tried everything, but I could not get my Herald of Thunder. And then I was like, why? I'm shocking, you know? And this is how I learned about the boss threshold. And then I was like, how can we fix that? And yes, there are several options. I'm gonna list a couple and why they are not good. Vessel of Vinctar is a flask, okay? The problem with flasks is, if I run out of flasks, I will not be able to shock the boss again, you know? And Cyrus has multiple phases. If I use a flask on every single phase, I might not have enough flask charges for the last phase to trigger my Herald of Thunder, for example. Then, Skitterbots. Skitterbots would not work in the first hand because we use Lone Messenger, means we cannot have any other auras, right? And the Skitterbots are an aura. And I think even if that would work, I don't think it will work because you need to shock an enemy, and the skitter bots are counted as minions, and the minions will shock the enemy, right? And to trigger Herald of Thunder, you need to shock. So I think, in one hand, skitter bots falls off. It's an aura, I cannot use it with low messenger, but I think even if you could, it's not working because your skitter bots are shocking. Then we had other ideas with, I don't know, various other things like ring, for example. Nearby enemies are shocked, you know, when you focus. Would work, but I'm using unique amulet, unique rings. I think it is an amulet or a ring craft or something. So I need to have a rare item, which is not good. You can only play with one Storm Secret, but don't forget, 50% increased frequency rate is actually 50% more damage because it hits more often per second, right? So removing one would actually will give me some damage loss. So 6.7, we will remove one ring, and I'm dropping to 4.8. So I'll almost lose 2 million DPS by unequipping one of those rings. And since Herald of Thunder is my main source of damage, I don't want to do that. Good. Back to shocking bosses. So what if you're not able to shock him, right? How do you do that? There is something, it's called effect of shock, right? And this is why I have the cluster with, Overshock. It is, your shocks can increase damage taken by a maximum of 60%. This does not matter, because there is two parts of shock, right? Effect of shock. One is the maximum amount, and this is, it depends how hard do you hit the enemy, how much does it lose life. I think you need to make like 10% of his maximum life in one single hit to get the maximum amount of shock effectiveness or something, right? With our build, with Brands and Heralds, we always do hundreds of minimum damage hits, but so many at once, you know, but they always do like low damage, right? So the only thing that we have to worry about is to inflict the shock to get your Herald off, right? It's not about we are like a 1000 DPS two-handed weapon with like, I don't know, like 10 million hit per second, you know? That's not how it works. So we are talking about now the second one. This is the increased effect of shock, which is good if you stack that because it will lower the threshold, okay? The more effect of shock that you have, the lower this will get. So now without any shock effect, as I said, this is just like numeric value so you understand the process. What if I cannot hit the 50,000 to shock an enemy? I stack shock effectiveness, let's say 50% shock effectiveness. I think it's 45 for me at the moment. I'm not even sure. Let me check my... Let's do Stormbrand. Where is it? Offense? Shock effectiveness 45. So 30% from the overshock and 25%... No, 15% if increased effect of non-damaging ailment. Shock is a non-damaging ailment. Makes it to 45. Don't get me wrong, guys. I don't want to calculate this now. But what that means is if I have shock effectiveness, I don't need to hit for 50,000 to inflict the shock. Now I only need to hit for like 30k to inflict the shock, right? So the shock effectiveness is mandatory to get this number low enough so I will still inflict the shock, although my hits are not that big. So if you have worse gear than I do, and you just cannot shock Cyrus or Guardians or something, increase your shock effectiveness to lower that number that you need to reach to inflict the shock that is actually not getting discarded, as I explained before. So this is important. Good. This is like one of the major things, the shock, how to shock bosses actually, because bosses work different. We talked about the life energy shield split that I choose. I mean, in the other hand, this is like early state, right? This is completely new stuff in 3.11 since this is when the rings got released. I'm pretty sure when a lot of people are playing those builds, somebody will come up with a better idea, actually even mind over matter with the agnostic and then stack mana regen or something so you can leech better or so. There is a lot of things that you can make on this build, right? So keep that in mind. This is not the perfect build, but this is the way I choose to go and it works, okay? That doesn't mean it's the best way to do it. So, good. That was about that. Then, what is also good while I'm using brands, first of all, it's lazy. Second, they added the new Herald cluster over here and the new brand cluster over here. And with my Unnatural Instinct in that spot, you get everything. You get reduced mana reservation, increased effect, you get the brand notes, you get the block notes, you get the spell damage notes, you get the, you get the spell damage per power charge. And keep in mind, this counts only for Stormbrand, because spell damage is not like, Herald of Thunder does not scale with spell damage. Keep that in mind. It's only increased damage, elemental damage, like any kind of global damage, even minion damage if you scale the Spiritual Aid, because it's still global damage, right? But spell damage does not count, but it will work for our Stormbrand. This is kind of our supplemental damage that is also doing like 3, 4, or 5 million DPS based on how good your gear is. Good. Let's talk about the items, the choices that I made. Why do I have those? And what could you replace with, or what would I even change? Because my gear is good, but still there's a lot of improvement. Helm. Herald of Thunder reduced mana reservation. Mandatory? Questionable. At this point, I need to say questionable because the main idea was to get the Herald plus Arctic Armor, which is not an aura, and Aspect of the Spider. This is what I wanted to reserve. It would work in the older version where I used like Inspiration and stuff like that, but now I'm using Awakened Gems and like other stuff like Awakened Lightning Pen and so on, so I'm reserving more mana. And with the current state, even with the mana reservation node, I have like 24% leftover mana. Okay, and I need that mana, so I think either like you take Arctic Armor or you take Aspect of the Spider. Both will work, depends on what you think is better. I just think less physical damage taken from hits and chilling area when you walk around, which is also counting for the Algo Mortis should be. So this is up to you. I don't think, I mean, you can actually sustain it. If you say you're gonna scale into mana reservation, then you could probably add the Aspect of the Spider as well and have enough mana to cut things. But I think with the Arctic Breath, just skipping the Aspect of the Spider works out great, to be honest, because Aspect of the Spider will also give you damage and is slowing enemies, so it's an offensive and defensive mechanic on this part. That's why I say, is Herald of Thunder reservation needed? As I said, depends. But I think, to be honest, the 40% increased damage will give me like 200,000 DPS. So I don't need 200,000 DPS if I have already 7 million or over 10 million if you combine Herald of Thunder with Stormbrand. So I'll just take mana reservation to get the Arctic Armor to get a little bit more defensive layers. Good, here I have Orb of Storms, Awaken Curse on hit on level 5 so I can get the additional curse, and then Ally Weakness and Conductivity. If you don't have that, Orb of Storms, normal curse on hit, and Conductivity. And then if you have the Awaken, then Ally Weakness. So what about the Helm? Usually you start with Life Resistance. This is what you start with. If you have currency, you get one. Usually you buy the Helm with the enchant, then you slam it with an Warlord's Orb, and then you try to get one max power charge with Life Resistance or anything like that. I got these rolls. It's not bad, but since we have a lot of sources where you get Energy Shield based on your life, I would rather have life instead of Energy Shield. But in the end, Energy Shield is not useless, okay? Not like in other builds where you just scale life and get Energy Shield. This is like a wasted stat basically, right? Good. So cheaper version, as I said, Life Resistance, that's it. For the staff, so this is actually interesting. I used to run the Ignorant South with the reduced mana reservation, or at least like reduced, maximum lightning resistance. But I said also at a certain level, when we get more life, more energy shield, we don't need Mind Over Matter anymore. We don't need the maximum lightning resistance anymore. So this is, the Ignorant is just a nice thing to go. What is this then? So I made an Eclipse Staff Shaper, alt spammed it for 1 max power charge, made an imprint with the Crazy Crimeral Beasts, and I Awakened Orb this together with the Crusader damage per power charge. This is global damage, right? So if I say I have 10 power charges, this gives me 170% increased damage to my Herald of Thunder as well, right? It's not spell damage. So that's pretty good, and both of these are suffixes, which allows you to like slam for a prefix. That is something I need to do still, and then multi-modded lightning damage. Lightning damage is extra chaos, which will also work, and that's it, you know. You might ask now, wait a second, you're using a two-handed staff. Why not do a Void Battery? Because you get 1 additional power charge. That's correct. But if you remember, what does a Void Battery do? It gives you spell damage per power charge. Does spell damage work for Herald of Thunder? No, it does not. So the only thing it gives you is 1 power charge. And this one gives me at least 170% damage to my Herald of Thunder, plus the craft with the lightning damage, and the lightning damage as extra chaos will all benefit from Herald of Thunder. Best way would be if I would slam +3 level of lightning gems or something. This would be even crazier, but this is something you can do. But as I said, power charge and damage per power charge are the mandatory things. Both are suffixes, so it's pretty easy to clean off and just multi-mod it. I have here Stormbrand. Control Destruction, Conk Effect, Lightning Pan, Energy Leech, and added Lightning Damage. Don't forget, level 5 added Lightning gives you +1 level of Lightning skills or gems as well. The supported ones, which is insanely strong. So alone, like, if I would get this to level 5 on my Herald of Thunder setup, this would give me, just this one, the level, will give me like 500,000 DPS extra, right? This is, it is just insane, all these base things. Quickly back to the topic, how do I leech life, how do I leech energy shield? Life leech comes from the Revitalizing Lightning or from the Cluster Jewel, and then we run the energy leech support both on the staff and on the Herald of Thunder setup. The thing is, this enables me, are you leeching? You're always leeching, because every time your Herald hits, you lose energy shield, and then you start leeching, and then you get the next hit, you start leeching, you're permanently leeching, so you get the almost 40% more damage, and this is kinda insane. And in the end, Awakened Added Lightning. Is this the best damage setup? No, it's not, right? Because Awakened Ally Focus does more damage, right? Do I need that? No, because I want my Stonebrand to shock to actually trigger the Herald of Thunder. Don't forget about that. Herald of Thunder itself cannot shock, so I'm not allowed to use any Awakened Elemental Focus on my Stonebrand setup either, because then I will never be able to shock Cyrus, right? There is other support gems that would be good, like Arcane Surge, I think, but Arcane Surge gives me spell damage, and spell damage doesn't benefit my Herald of Thunder, so I skip that as well. So sometimes the best DPS setup based on Path of Building is not always the DPS setup that will give you the most damage. Good. Chest, Explode Chest, Frenzy on hit with the Badge of the Brotherhood. Badge of the Brotherhood is something that I would not really recommend, because they go for like 30 plus exalts, and this only works if you have Frenzy Charge on hit. You could use the Choir of the Storm. This was something I was using before. This triggers like 5 times a second. It's a nice DPS gain as well. Here I have Herald of Thunder, Awakened Ally Focus, because Herald of Thunder cannot shock. Added Lightning Damage, Energy Shield Leech, Lightning Pan, and Power Charge on critical. Then the both rings, we talked about those. Algo Mortis for the freeze. How do I get this chilled area? Cast damage taken, Shock Nova, Cold Snap, Wave of Conviction. Wave of Conviction will apply lightning exposure based on the damage that we get from our Herald of Thunder. Then the Cold Snap to create this chilled area, so the enemy gets the 35% more lightning damage. And Shock Nova is basically, if you're just standing there and you get hit, you proc your cast when it's shaken, you use Shock Nova, the Shock Nova crits, you proc your Herald of Thunder. This is basically if you're too lazy to use Stonebrand to proc your shock. For the belt, can use Headhunter obviously would be great. I don't even have one at the moment. Probably will get one at some part. Otherwise, Life Resistance. This is just to cover up the missing stuff. For the boots, Life Resistance. I got one with Tailwind and Movement Speed. I multi-modded that with Cannot Be Frozen and Life. But on the chest, for example, I still need to get the Cold Resistance remodded, same as on the boots. We have like double Cold Resistance here, 6 Cold Resistance. This is like tier 1000 or something. Abyss Jewel, I have Onslaught on kill, Facing on kill, so that's something you can do. Maybe even augment this one with Life or something if I get it on the Harvest Grove. Then for the Flasks, Life Flask with Bleed Immunity, Bottled Faith is super nice. 10% increased damage taken by the enemy on consecrated ground, increased crit strike chance. Cinder Swallow Urn will easily cover your life and energy shield leech for mapping, so you don't have to worry about it. Diamond Flask with Freeze Immunity, not really too necessary since I got the Frozen Craft, but it's still, why not, and the Quicksilver Flask to move faster. Then for jewels, don't forget, we have no other auras than like Herald of Thunder, so we don't need a Watcher's Eye, because Herald of Thunder doesn't have a Watcher's Eye. Based on the jewels, you can get anything like life, resistance, multiplier, or even life with like triple multiplier, whatever you want, which is pretty good. For cluster jewels, as I said, Overshock, pretty nice. Tempt to Storm, this should actually be a bigger icon. With Conductivity Curse Effect is not too bad, but the mandatory thing is Overshock, and then I have 2 Self-Fulfilling Prophecy for the base crit and multiplier, and Empowered Envoy here with Lone Messenger, and here with a Sublime Sensation with increased max life and energy shield. Those 2 are the same. Other than that, I don't think so. I'm actually in a little bit of a hurry right now, so I try to make this as quick as possible. Path of Building link is in the description below, as always, if you want to see the current state of the art. Then we have the complete new dark helmet, dark body armor, the set, the Stygian character effect, the wings, the arcane halo, arcane mark of Phoenix, demonic weapon with the dark weapon effect, Stygian character effect, Stygian footprint, Stygian portal effect. The Herald effect that I'm using is the Stygian. The other ones, yeah, Stygian flame dash effect. For Pantheons at the moment, Brine King, because it happened quite often when I'm mapping that I get stun locked when I'm not popping monsters instantly. And this is something I needed for full delirium maps, because these monsters do have shit tons of life, and once you get stun locked, you're dead, you know. And this allows you, if you get stunned, you cannot get stunned again in the next 2 seconds or something. And Soul of Shakari to get another layer of defense against poison. You can also take the Soul of Arakali for the reduced damage taken, or 10% chance to avoid lightning damage. That means if your Herald of Thunder hits 10 times, there's probably 1 time you will not get damage from your rings because it is still a hit. Good. I think that's it for the build. Hope you have as much fun as I have with the build. As I said again, this build is just insane. I really love it. It's a speed mapper. It can do all content. I'm actually doing Cyrus carries with this one. It's a bit squishier side, but I am, as I said, on the other parts, you can actually get even more life on the tree, for example, because I think we have way than enough damage. You could actually probably just skip the left side if you don't go with the Heralds and just scale down here and take the full Scion Life cluster, for example. That would work as well. For the Ascendancies, Mistwalker, Deadly Infusion, Unstable Infusion, and Ambush. The Ambush is something I took on the first lap just to make it faster. Then the 2 power charge nodes in the end elusive, or doesn't really matter, to be honest, right? So this is just something when you have the power charges, but you don't need the power charge on crit since we have that socketed in, and this gives me more damage per power charge as well. Good! That's it, guys. Thanks for tuning in, thanks for watching, and see you on the next video.